are having the first subject session, if you like. It is, as Anniko said, paradigm shift in the area of escalation, transformative technologies, conflict dynamics, and science diplomacy. There will be two keynote presentations, and followed by a panel of 7 distinguished scientists who would highlight different aspects of this theme. And I hope that by the end of this session, we are evolving toward a huge round table. It means that after the thought-provoking presentations, also the participants are invited to address and ask questions. And I was given a certain green light by Director General Myslivets that this session of food of thought can impinge into the time food for the body, which is at 1 o'clock, so we may overdo a little bit, especially if you are very eager to ask questions to the panel. We shall try to save time by this opulent introduction which Anniko did to my decent career. I would not introduce in detail the panelists and the 2 keynote speakers, because all these short CVs are available in your little Bible, which is the original program and as a participants and the lecturers. So please consult it for the background of the presentators. I can assure you that we have la crème de la crème, to use something from French, so the best what Hungary and as an area can provide. I do not want to make the joke that we have gender balance, but I always manage to say that we have gender balance because 1 lady is worth 6 men. Okay, so the first presentation is by Professor Norbert Kroó. He is member of the Hungarian Academy of Sciences. This is the only detail. I am mentioning it because according to many how do you call it? So questionnaire actions turned out to be the organization in Hungary which has the highest esteem and the highest trust from the population. Norbert, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you. My task is to give some sort of introduction to the disruptive technologies issue from the point of view how a physicist looks at it. So it is reflected in the title of my talk. And as a basis, I copied this from internet. I found it a very nice definition of what disruptive technologies are. For a technology to be considered disruptive, it has to be modify a habit or behavior and accessible to the majority of population. Many of them are closely related to the so-called professions of the future. And here I gave some examples also collected from internet. It is 15. I could very easily add much more. But what I would like to emphasize, if you look at the details of it, then all of them reflect some combination of other technologies. And this is one of my basic knowledge. New technologies are mainly formed by the combination of existing ones or modernization of them by some new findings. Some of them, and this I think I should emphasize it here at this place, are, or all of them, connected with social sciences or humanities as well. For example, if you look at advanced virtual reality or cybersecurity or hyper-personalization, but I could go on all of them, all involve some social science aspects or humanities. And they are all combination of something else. The other thing what I would like to emphasize in my brief introduction is that technologies by itself are only possibilities. The important issue is how we are using them. Let me give you one example. artificial intelligence. It can be used for better things and can be used for worse things. I listened to a talk on that, and this is typical for Europe. Someone said that, well, the new technologies are found in the US, they are realized in China, and they are regulated in Europe. I think this is something what we should not take seriously. Regulation is important, but what is before it is at least as important, if not more important. Now, a physicist cannot get rid of his own or her own hobby. So what I intended to do is to show in my research how I realized this brief introduction, what I mentioned you now. I would like to mention a special light. You know, with light there is a limit. The limit is that if the two subjects, two points are nearer than the half of the wavelength roughly of light, then any optical device cannot resolve it. And therefore, normal light cannot be the light of nanotechnology. Now, there is a special type of light. There is a special type of light, which is the light, in my understanding, of nanotechnology, and it is called surface plasmons. Surface plasmons are excited on a metal surface or some other material, special material, and it has some special properties, but the most important one is shown in this slide. In this figure there is a gold plate with small holes about 100 nanometer diameter. So classical light, which is 600 nanometer or so, cannot go through these small holes. But if you look at the other photo on the right side, light went through it. And this was due to this surface plasmon. So this is a very nice indication of that. I don't go into the details of that. Now, I would like to show you 3 examples how this new technology combined with some other technology can bring something completely new things. This is just an illustration. I don't go into the details. On this slide, I'll show you a special microscope, which is called a scanning tunneling microscope. Nobel Prize was given for the discovery of this one. It is a tip which moves above the surface and can, on this microscope, what I developed, we could get a resolution of 5 nanometers with light, which is 600 nanometers. And the reason is that the surface plasmons are behind it. Now, with this facility, we could prove that not only microscopic, but mesoscopic systems can also have quantum properties, even macroscopic ones. That's very exciting, but I don't, of course, I can't go to the details. The second one, this is showing a tube where we can measure how fast particles are moving in that. And these particles, electrons in this case, were excited by the surface plasmons. They were moving in this tube, and we could find that even making use of this new type of light, you can produce superconductivity at room temperature, which is exciting thing again. So there is a microscope, there is a special technology, there is another technology which is called time of flight, and combination of two could realize room temperature superconductivity, which in my understanding has not been reached anywhere else yet. Now the third one is, this peak number 3 is the proof of that. I just give you as an illustration. The third one I want to show is what we are doing presently, and this is connected with how we could produce energy with fusion. Just look at the lower line. There it is shown that how much material is needed for a certain amount of energy to be produced. 1 kilogram of uranium, 20 tons of coal, and 0.7 gram for fusion material. So of course, it is of course clear that everybody would like to solve the problem of fusion, not only in a hydrogen bomb, but in energy production, because the most material efficient way of doing this could be fusion. And again, how fusion is working. Fusion is working so in the sun that the sun has a gravitational force to the middle, and there the density is very high. If you squeeze something, then it gets very hot. The temperature is at about 100 million degrees centigrade, and there the hydrogen atoms are the nuclei are so fast that they can fuse and produce energy. Now, my experience is that the most efficient technologies are the ones which we succeeded to steal from nature. So with laser, we could try to replace gravitational force. How? Replace it by getting a small sphere of fusion material, putting around it some heavy material, shine laser light from all directions, evaporating the material, and the reaction force pushes it together. This is, for example, the way how the National Ignition Facility, a huge stadium-sized facility with 192 enormous lasers, tried to squeeze a small mini hydrogen bomb in order to squeeze it together, explode it, which means producing fusion, and getting energy. They succeeded already to get 1.5 times as much energy as the laser light, which was shining this material from 192 directions to have homogeneous squeezing. But this is very slow, so we thought that why wouldn't it be better to bring the light into the velocity of light into the material, putting there some very small nanoparticles, which with the surface plasmons, which collect the energy from a huge volume to a small volume. So it acts as if you had a 100,000 times or 1 million times bigger laser. So small country, small laser, big country, big laser. Surface plasmons can replace the big country and having it in a small country. In that case, it is enough to shine 2 laser lights from 2 directions, or even 1, and making use of the special properties of the material. Here you can show what is the result. If we have a material, it's a plastic, where we don't have nanoparticles, no, we don't have surface plasmons, then there is a hole what we burn in a material with a laser shot on a table, a small laser, which is the image on the left side below. The big one with the same laser energy if you have nanoparticles. So you may see that there is some enormous change, and this means that energy was produced there. And the energy what was produced can be shown here. It was 7 times as much as the laser energy. So 6 times, minimum 6 times as much energy was produced than what we were shooting in. Not 1.5, 6. So again, there is a technology which is called surface plasmons. If you combine it with something else, you may see the enormous benefit of it. So this is what I wanted to give as an introduction. So science is exciting. Problems can be solved, even those problems which otherwise people don't believe that they can be solved. And the solution is, and this has been always the philosophy in my research, in our research, combining existing knowledge to getting something new. I think I used up my time, so that was my introduction.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much to let us look into your laboratory and see that you are on a very exciting way towards creating more and more energy from less and less material. And this is, I believe, many of us did not follow all the very details, but it gives us also hope that science is on a good track, and there are dedicated scientists like Professor Kroó who are leading the way towards energies, and which can be called in a very bad term, but otherwise very essential to towards sustainability. Let me call on the second keynote speaker. It is Tibor Tóth, Secretary General Emeritus of the Nuclear Test Ban Treaty Organization. So it is also a little bit around energy, but on the less than peaceful use of the energy. And we can see that, as Professor Kroó showed in the beginning, these technologies can be for the good or the worse, and this is up to us to emphasize the good toward the better. Thank you very much, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I really feel privileged to sit here today because of this presentation. You might recall in 1942 in Chicago, Fermi and Leo Szilard, launched the first controlled nuclear chain reaction. And what we heard today, hopefully, and might be something not the Chicago pile, but the pile of iASK, in case this idea is proven. So I would like to challenge from this vantage point those who are responsible for allocating resources. Give a chance to this idea to become something which is born not in the US, but in Hungary, in Eastern Europe, and in Europe. I would like to use the notion of most, UNESCO. And may I ask the question, the word most, for how many in your native language or in your spoken language means breach? Can you raise your hands? Okay, quite a number. And I would like to address this notion of the bridge. And I would like to go back and forth in time, and it will be 130 years going back and 20, 30 years going forward. And I would like to use this notion of the bridge to describe something which, in my judgment, is a transition from one industrial technological era to the next industrial technological era. And I use this comparison of a bridge, which is potentially a bridge 50, 60 years long. It's a bridge which is very high. Falling from the bridge is not the right thing to do. And what I would like to see is this bridge is enabling your generation, the millennials, to walk through it safely. Last week in Vienna, I announced an idea, an initiative, in front of the Organization Security and Cooperation in Europe Parliamentary Assembly. And I raised this point out of concern where this bridge might go or how safe this bridge might be. And I suggested to create an international panel on the transition. In shorthand, I described to you the transition, and I would like to back to this notion. How to use the right design and the right implementation of the bridge concept. I wonder whether our technician colleague can help to put on the screen. I have two photos in case it works. This is a photo from 2013. This is probably one of the highest concentration of geniuses on a screen possible. These are Nobel Prize winners at that time or in the future. 2013. This was the last moment they could meet a scientist for 8 years. 1913. This was the last moment they could meet for 8 years. Until 1921, they could not reconvene. So this gives you an idea about science diplomacy in a provocative way, because I will be very provocative in my talk. The second slide is, this is 1907, the Hague Convention on the Law of Warfare Participants. It started in 1899 with the notion of preserving peace. It ended in 1907 with useful achievements on the law of the war and on creating the Court of Justice in The Hague. But I would say, and I would claim, that this diplomatic operation was successful, but in 7 years, in a decade, the patient was dead. And not just the patient was dead, that is security, speaking about in Europe, and probably more globally, but what was dead as well, the casualties of the period which ensued. And here I would like to go into the notion of this long arch, and I would like to put together, in a way which is not very academic probably, one potential interpretation of the past. It's more easy to project the future. It's more difficult to project the past. So this interpretation is the following. Let's take the period 1890-1950, not as freestanding dots, not dots which are unrelated, which have nothing to do with each other. And let's assemble from 1890 the 12 recessions which took place, especially in the late 19th century, the Great Depression, which took place in the 1920s, the war, let's call it a war, not wars, a war, a continuum of war from 1914 to 1945 with a short armistice in between those First War and the Second War. And let's add to these dots the radicalization of the people, communism and fascism and Nazis and barbarism on a massive scale. And if we pull these things together, and if we assume that potentially the 1890-1950 period was a degenerated transition from one industrial era, from one industrial technological age to the next one, then we understand what kind of job is cut out for us when we are trying to contemplate how we are making this bridge in a different way than it was designed by those who were responsible for the design of this bridge, and how we make sure that as we walk forward, we do not disappear in the cracks of this bridge, which had many in 1890-1950 execution. I would like to make a point about this transition period we are in my judgment, from the late 1980s. So we might be in already for a couple of decades. And I would like to make the point that repeating the same thing which did not work in this previous transition, the degenerated second transition, repeating the same mistakes doesn't make them work. Grabbing land and people and resources, this is not the way to face a transition. The transition is more complex than finding an answer like that. Beggar the neighbor or rob your neighbor, it's a trade terminology. To seek advantages through trade restriction did not work. And this is the wrong answer because this is a transition right now. We are not in the 18th century. We are not in the 17th century. It's more complex because of the global interaction. The notion of different type of new isms, be it left wing or right wing, is not an answer. And radicalism is not an answer because it is a transition. It's more complex that your generation, my father's and grandfather's generation have seen. and the last time it had not been sorted out the right way. So we have to acknowledge to ourselves, or the scientists will have to acknowledge, this one we haven't seen, and the last one was mismanaged. Of course, this is not a winning ticket for a politician with a 2 or 4 years time span to look forward. But this is the only honest way to look into the eyes, our eyes in the mirror, and the eyes of generations behind us. I don't think that in a situation like that, the answer of make X, Y, or Z is the right answer. No, because this is transition. And I don't think that in a complex transition we are facing, omnipotent leadership is not the right answer. Because of the complexity, we need all around distributed systems. This is a system of systems which should be comprised of distributed systems, not a pyramid on the top with one person. The idea is not to repeat a socio-economic security tabula rasa. Tabula rasa meaning melting the scripture which we are carrying in our genes, economically, socially, culturally. Tabula rasa is not the way forward. This transition going on for 3 reasons, in my mind, is more complex, if you need any more complexity, than the one, 1890, 1950. Nuclear weapons, number 1, climate change, number 2, and artificial intelligence. I don't have the time to go in any of them. My expertise on nuclear, I would love to talk 3 hours about that. Let me touch upon the artificial intelligence. And this is, especially the climate change and the artificial intelligence, making this transition, not just the transition from one industrial era to another, but make it a triple transition. We have to make a safe transition of the climate change, first time in the history of man. We have to make a safe transition on the coexistence, on the AGI, on the singularity, on the issue of how to coexist with machine for the first time in the existence of humankind. So it's a triple transition. And again, we need all the humility to summon inside us and collectively to think through what else we can do. The artificial intelligence, in my judgment, not just a potential issue, but it's a potential springboard to get it better. And when I say to get it better, I don't think we will be able to change totally some of the underlying processes, economic, social, cultural, and other processes. But if we manage, millimeter by millimeter, to adjust the direction of this bridge, which right now, in my judgment, is leading us in the same direction as the previous bridge. And it might be full of gaps as we move forward. Then this 1 millimeter today and another millimeter tomorrow might have. Artificial intelligence, White is giving a stretch hand for us. Number 1, the old notion of big power status is not defined anymore by tens or hundreds of thousands of square kilometers of your empire. It's not defined anymore by adding 1, 5, or 10 million people to your empire. It's not defined anymore, though who knows, whether grabbing resources, new resources, from another country is the solution for your problem. Artificial intelligence is enabling countries to become big power. And keep in mind Singapore. I do not have to go into details, but your strengths will be measured in GPUs, A1 chips. It will be measured how many agents you can deploy, how quickly you can combine artificial intelligence with robots and other technologies which academician Kroó described on his first slide. So it's giving a new perspective, which is a perspective, a very short window of opportunity. If today countries are wasting $1 billion per day on the old way of doing business, they are taking away $1 billion per day from getting it right on artificial intelligence, and they will maneuver themselves in a secondary or tertiary status because they will not be a big power because of their own decision in the next 5 or 10 years. The artificial intelligence, of course, is rewriting the whole notion of demography. There is a gloom and doom in many of the OECD countries. Why? Because of the declining birth rate. And the artificial intelligence, which is right now able to get to the PhD level, which means 98% of the population. So PhD, 2% of the top, 98%. This is what it can do today. So you understand what kind of intellectual research force multipliers are in our hands if we stretch out our arms and spending the money not on the wrong thing from the previous bridge building exercise. I would like to come back to the notion of the initiative I aired last week. This is a parliament assembly with more than 330 parliamentarians, Europe, North America, and Asia, 57 countries. So I think is the right spectrum to raise it. And the idea was to create on the transition I try to describe to you, and I hope, notwithstanding the short time, you understand what I'm speaking about. I'm speaking about a transition which is tenable. It's not perfect. I won't even call it optimized, but tenable. Somehow we find a way on this long bridge that it will not happen like in the previous one, where 100 million casualties of that period as a result of the continuum of war, another 100 million because of the Spanish flu, which didn't have the right resources in 1918 because all the resources were eaten up by the war. 100 million by the most recent estimates. This is 200 million casualties of the mismanaged transition. 4 empires came down. 2 were put in the emergency room for resuscitation. This is 6. So I think we can get it right. We can get it right, and what I'm proposing is a very modest proposal on designing in a better way and building in a better way that bridge. IPTT, International Panel on the Transition. It's very close to the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, where that panel summoned more than 3,000 scientists, and they were measuring and modeling and trying to mitigate the climate change, to keep it below 1.5 level. Let's use it to keep the temperature of this transition below 1.5 level, and to find ways. These are minuscule areas with focused attention where, based on the existing knowledge, action is possible. And the knowledge is out there. Artificial intelligence is enabling them not to try to catch up to gather 3,000 scientists, but to deploy LLMs and artificial intelligence, because they can do a lot of things which have been done in the context of IPCC by the scientific community. Yes, the status of knowledge on the transition. Yes, putting together science-based and knowledge-based information, not something which is out there, but science-based and knowledge-based. And to have a high-frequency assimilation, whether this 1 millimeter adjusting, whether we are on the right track or not. And practically organize it not as an intergovernmental entity because of that one, the lessons of that one, okay? it will have to be something which I would call open source. Open source where what matters is, of course, knowledge and science, but what matters is the fate of your generation, the millennials, that you can walk the bridge in the right way. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Tibor, for this inspiring presentation. I liked very much your symbolism about the bridge. And it occurred in my mind that if you take the Euro notes, they all feature bridges. And on one of the Euro notes, there is a bridge which was built not to cross the river, but to bring material, namely water, to the people. And this bridge was functional for 1,000 years, and it's still standing, and you can still walk around technologically, because the transition then was not so smooth. They could not repair around 1,000 Anno Domini, but the bridge is still around. So it was well built in the time of that, what we call the Pax Romana. Thank you very much indeed. And I would now proceed to invite the 7 panelists in a sequence that's starting with 5 scientists who are more exercising physics, chemistry, life sciences, and then inviting 2 participants of the panel who are coming from social science, diplomacy, politics, to reflect upon the challenges which probably will be first highlighted and exemplified by the first 5 presentators. So Dan Brooks is the first whom I would like to invite, 7 minutes sharp. Thanks.
Is this active? Yes. Okay. All right. Nope. Wrong presentation.
I have just this.
I sent a shorter presentation 3 days ago. No, that's not the one. Well, let me give you the presentation that I sent, and I'll try to draw some word pictures. You can just eliminate that. That was the one I prepared when I was first invited to give a keynote lecture. And then Friday I found out I was doing 7 minutes on the panel. So I want to talk to everybody in the audience and everybody online who is younger than 35 years old. And the rest of you, I don't care. And that includes me. I'm going to tell you something, you younger people, I'm going to tell you something you already know about the world. The danger is great, the time is short, and we are unprepared. I'm also going to suggest to you that there are 2 general ways that scientists and non-scientific academics can talk to you. You can be dazzled with data, or you can be baffled with bullshit. And my experience in 40 years of teaching undergraduate students and graduate students is that students have extraordinarily good bullshit detectors. So I'm going to try to give you a minimum of bullshit, but at the same time, I'm going to try to suggest to you that there's reason for you to not give up hope. And I'm going to give you 2 assertions. The first is that from a biological perspective, it's unrealistic to think that innovations will emerge during unsettled times. In biology, evolutionary innovations do not emerge during times of crisis. During times of crisis, innovations that are already known are made use of. Innovations that were already known but not particularly well utilized suddenly become important. But real innovation, something new, something novel, requires stable times to emerge. So if we are in unstable times, anytime any kind of manager of any kind of operation mandates innovations, they're not going to get it because that's an unrealistic expectation. What you need to mandate is stable times. Now the reality is, and the most recent, is that it? Okay, next slide, please. All right. These are the 5 books that I've brought out in the last 5 years since I've been working at iASK. The one on the lower right is the one that I'll be talking about the most today. The others deal mostly with climate change and emerging disease issues. Now, what we've suggested, Sal and I've suggested, is that humanity already has enough technology to ensure its survival through 2050, which is when the majority of climate change threat multipliers are predicted to come together in very, very unpleasant ways on a global scale. By 2050, for example, if the United States continues business as usual with respect to its food production, food security, by 2050, the United States will have lost between 35 and 65% of its food production due to drought. 87% of the United States is currently under drought threat. Now, you can make these statements for virtually every country on the planet. Too wet, too dry, too cold, too hot. Some degree of instability, either climatically or socially, and oftentimes both at the same point. This is not a time that's going to be conducive for great thoughts about amazing new ideas. This is a time to use what we have to deal with the problems that we have at hand. And the good news is that we actually have enough technology already to deal with the problem. What we don't have is the desire to change our behavior. Let's see. Now let me see if I can do this. There we go. Okay. Necessity is not the mother of invention. Conflict doesn't lead to good things. War is not good for the economy, anywhere. Necessity in biological history, including human history, including history in the last 10,000 years. Conflict, necessity, is the mother of running away from the problem until you find safety. And once you're safe, then you can think about innovative ways to deal with your conditions. All right, the second thing I want to say is cities are a problem, not a solution. The reason we have a discipline called archaeology is because there are more abandoned cities than occupied cities on this planet. What does this tell us about the role of cities historically in the last 10,000 years? Well, it tells us that cities are an extremely efficient means of social control. They become very, very powerful economically, and they generate enormous amount of wealth for a very small proportion of the people who live there. Traditionally, the wealth is concentrated in the social institutions of religion, governance, and finance. Only a very small proportion of the population in cities benefits from all that power. When cities outlive their usefulness, the rich people leave and start over again, and the poor people mostly die. So when cities outlive their usefulness, when cities are hit with a massive disaster, natural or man-made disaster, cities become this very strange method of human population control. The people who are trapped in the cities because they're poor die there. And that resets the human population, and we start over again. That's what we've been doing for 9,000 years. And that's the main behavior that we cannot continue if we're going to survive past 2050. That's the challenge for all of you who are still going to be alive at that point in time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Being slightly above 35, I am happy to see that I do not face this challenge, but this challenge is still around. And let me invite Péter Dombi, who I believe closer to 35 than some of the panelists and myself, to address us. Please.
So thank you very much for this opportunity to speak about, actually not so much about my research, but much more about the position of something like an educated citizen, because I'm not an energy expert, right? So Professor Bogárdi prompted me to say some words about energy, and I just collected a number of pieces of information for this. But before that, just a quick introduction. I'm an experimental physicist doing laser research in Budapest and also in the south of Hungary. My second affiliation is in Szeged, this so-called Eli laser facility. I'm managing the research efforts of some 40 researchers, including biologists, chemists, and physicists, material science, and so on and so forth. But now I'm talking as more like an educated citizen in this respect. So first, let me share you some fun facts that I collected for you, and by the end of the list, you will see that they are completely not fun at all. In terms of switch it on, yeah, that helps. So, for example, yesterday we had a nice discussion over dinner that why nuclear power is not the solution because of spent fuel issues. That's going to take, the cost of spent fuel is going to be by the year, I don't know what are the figures for that, but incredible numbers to handle the spent fuel issue in terms of nuclear power. Then there is renewables. But there are well-known storage problems for the renewable energy. So what do you do when the sun is not shining and the wind is not blowing? What do you do? How do you store the energy that you gather by the renewable energy sources? And then there is an interesting fact about even within the renewables, in terms of silicon solar cells. That's 99% of the solar cell production is based on the silicon technology. With the current production capacities, it takes 100 years to be able to cover the current energy need of humanity with silicon solar cells. So 100 years, all the Chinese factories producing silicon solar cells, 100 years. They have a lifetime of something like 20 years, so you have to calculate that or take that into account as well. Another fact that is rather interesting is that some projects are being sold right now and being financed as highly disruptive, highly transformative technologies. And one of them is one of the fusion projects, not that of Professor Kroó, but the project called ITER, which is a global effort, by the way. This is based on this so-called magnetic confinement fusion, so this fusion without lasers. And by today, it already cost the US, the EU, Chinese and Japanese taxpayers some $65 billion in 40 years now. And the current date of anything happening in this big vacuum chamber that is being constructed in France right now is something like the current deadline is 2035. And by now, $60 billion spent for a concept that I very much doubt that it will ever work. So somehow this is a proof that some decentralized top-down kind of approach is failed somehow in terms of energy. But I also had the privilege to have a discussion with Professor Dan Brooks in the car yesterday. So 2.5 hours between Budapest and Kőszeg, and that's a nice opportunity. And the hope I see for humanity in terms of this particular issue is that there is evidence that local communities can solve global problems sometimes much more efficiently than centralized approaches. So that is my well, one single message for today. And if I want to reduce it further, this kind of message, let me just mention you one single word, which is subsidiarity. I'm just asking the audience who knows the meaning of this word, subsidiarity. And the under 35 section of this room didn't raise hands, and the above 50 people raised hands with maybe one or two exceptions. So, and this is bad, because subsidiarity is by definition, is the principle that issues should be solved at the most local level of society that is possible, or that is most fitting the issue, and issues should not be solved by a central authority as long as this is possible. So, so the role of local communities should be increased, and nation states. The role of nation states could be increased. That's also a way of subsidiarity in terms of centralized EU solutions. And for some reason, and that was also pointed out by some preparation materials by Professor Bogárdi, is that this word is disappearing from EU vocabulary. And but it was very much part of it by, until something like 10 or 20 years ago. The background of this subsidiarity word is, by the way, in the it's a core concept of the social teaching of the Catholic Church, by the way. So we need diversification of efforts and local efforts and approaches, and one very good example is that one of Professor Kroó, who is doing something completely new in terms of like this fusion type of solution. And if we have this kind of approach in terms of also research and science funding, then this could provide a hope for resolving all the issues that we are facing now. And with this, I would like to thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. Thank you also to relate the energy, which is a hardcore physical question, with a hardcore governance question and a little bit the crisis of the European Union. Now we have two colleagues who are coming from the University of Pannonia, and here behind the screen there is a Molino of the University of Pannonia, which has a campus here in Kőszeg, and the question which you don't see, but after the session you may read, dare to ask. And you know the institute here is iASK. So this is also a kind of asking you to ask questions later on. So the next speaker is Professor András Gelencsér, the former rector of University of Pannonia, and the floor is yours.
Thank you. I prepared a little longer presentation, but I will try to keep my time. So I will talk about green transition as humanity's collective delusion. So unfortunately, the problem of climate change is thought to be solved by the green transition and the in combination with digitalization, and it offers a sustainable green and smart future, at least in the world of illusions. So this is a very simple concept used by politicians, and I refer to Daniel Brooks' talk as bullshit, because this doesn't work out in practice. So what's about the status of green transition? Just recall some figures from a real world. So the global decarbonization efforts were launched in 1992 by the Rio conference. But since then, the global CO2 emissions are up by 67%, and it is still going up. And if you considering the fossils share in global energy mix, it is still 82%, whereas in 1980, when there was no effort to decarbonize the world, it was 85%. So it's a very slow progress, I would say, all these green transition. And the reason for that is that green innovations are stalled in mass industrial sectors. So, for example, the big four, the steel, cement, plastic, and fertilizer industry, has not a single industrial scale decarbonized solution or electrified solution at all anywhere in the world. But if you think of global aviation, shipping, or military, you couldn't find a single decarbonized or electrified solution. I guess none of the people coming from Asia came by electric planes, or did you? I doubt so. So there are not a single solution in this mass industry, and they account for about 50% of global energy use. So there was no idea how to decarbonize, because we are not doing that for more than 40 years. Of course, there are some, if you consider news from the media, this is kind of a bullshit generator. So it offers you solutions already on the scene. So like this ship to the left, this is container ship, electrified, fully electrified, or the electric plane on the right. This is also some example of development, I would say. But if you consider its capacity, this container ship can carry 700 container units, as against the 24,000 units used by commercial ships, cargo ships, and the range is only 350 kilometers with one charge. So it's not really to cross the ocean with this vessel. It cannot go out to ocean, because it's too weak to be managed out there. And the ship is also a very thin example, like 9 passengers to 800 kilometers. That's not for global aviation at all. So why we are at this stage? Because we have very little progress in battery technologies, which are absolutely not new. It's more than 150 years old. The first lead-acid battery, which is currently is still in use, has an energy density of 40 watt-hour per kilogram. This is the essential characteristic of a battery, how much energy it can store in a unit volume or mass. Nowadays, lithium-ion batteries have a power density of about 6 times as much, some 240 watt-hour per kilogram. This is state-of-the-art technology I'm talking about. But if you compare it to what it needs to replace, actually fossil fuels has an energy density of 13,000 watt-hour per kilogram, which is 60 times as much as the most powerful battery capacity. So that's why we don't have electric planes, we don't have electric cargo ships and or freight transport, because that's a huge difference, which is impossible to go through. But of course, this doesn't affect the media. They come out with new and new sensational news in as regards innovation is concerned. So if you read the media, you find every day revolution in battery industry, which doesn't happen, only in the mind of some journalists, some politicians. And there is my best example how stupid humanity is. This is science paper, which is the most renowned scientific magazine, which came out with an article from the ETH Zurich. Researchers found that when we inject 5 million tons of diamond powder into the stratosphere each year, then we will stop climate change. So this is where we are in innovation. That's brilliant ideas. I think this is a kind of bullshit, but it doesn't help solving our police crisis that we face in the future. So it would be high time going back to the Earth and find real solutions that we have. So when we keep on this green transition business with these technologies, then we will run into a very rapid collapse of modern civilization by using up all of our resources that we still have and just leaving left without any resource to manage our future. So that's I conclude with a quotation from Aldous Huxley, who said that facts do not cease to exist because they are ignored. So I thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much for this sobering summary. And now it disappeared, but I just told Professor Gelencsér at the beginning of this morning that this book he just projected, Ábrándok bűvöletébe, should be translated into English to be a more powerful wake-up call than it is only echoed in Hungarian. Dezső, the floor is yours.
Hello, everybody. May I have my slideshow, please? Thank you. All right. So I'm the person here who is responsible for putting things into a complex context. Oh, that was difficult to say. So the purpose of this very short talk, I have not much time, is to little bit talk about complexity. What is that? Why everybody is talking about complexity? Many people use that word without knowing what is that. I want to just a few words about why our word now, our technological, ecological, economical, cultural, and so on word is complex. I hope I don't have to explain that. I want to stress that increasing interconnectedness of the players of this world, that include viruses, humans, money, everything on the surface of the earth, has an increasing structural complexity because of increasing globalization. We need to stress that this increasing complexity leads to increasing fragility of the system, and I want to focus on the concept of emergent fragility. The term hidden fragility is also used for this thing. Okay, what is complexity? I give you a definition. Complex systems are hierarchical, which means that they contain a lot, zillions, billions of players, agents, elements, call them as you want, that act on the lower level of the hierarchy, and their behavior, their interactions lead to some sort of emergent order on the higher levels of the system. This higher level, the word emergent is very important because it means that the order, the behavior on the higher level, the level of the society, the level of the world politics or whatever, is a spontaneous emergent order. It's a self-organized system. Okay, and it's also important to stress that feedback loops work in such a complex system, which means that there are information exchange between the players of the system, and this information is necessary for the players to do an adaptive behavior, to make an adaptive response to the occurring stimuli, the occurring challenges on every level of the system. Okay, So I probably don't have to emphasize that globalization is increasing complexity. That because of it increases the interconnectedness. There are more nodes and there are more connection between the nodes, if you think in terms of networks. Okay, a complex system is a dynamical one. It means that there is no equilibrium. Forget about equilibrium. Equilibrium is death. Life is a dynamic process where things happen. So there is no peace, there is no equilibrium, forget about it. In a dynamical system, things are always changing. And the problem that today things are changing fast. That's our main problem. They are changing fast in the bad direction. Okay, so we need to adapt to these challenges. And many people tend to believe that technology will solve our problem. I'm not saying that we should throw away our laptops. I'm not saying we should not use technology. I'm saying just we should give up the illusion that technology alone, without any serious behavioral change, will solve our problems. It will not. And the other thing is, I would like to connect to András, that complexity requires energy. It's simply thermodynamics. Large complexity is less entropy, it requires energy. So technology, everything requires energy. We need to get that energy from somewhere, and we are running out of it. Okay, so what is hidden fragility? The hidden fragility means that so there are fragilities in every kind of system. The grid is a good example. If a part of the system is falling out, it may lead to the failure of the whole system. And hidden fragility means that there might be, if in the dynamical changing system, the feedback loops change. Feedback loops that were hidden so far occur, or feedback loops that were present so far vanish, the new fragilities may occur in our system that cannot foresee. Okay, that's why it emerged spontaneously in the system. That's why we call it emergent, and we call it hidden, because we couldn't see it so far. And these kind of things can lead to systemic risks very quickly. Okay, if you want to deal with these problems, I heard about a lot here, strategies, policy, bridge, whatever. So it's in our genes to make strategies, to plan. It's an evolutionary drive. Okay, so need strategy, we need planning, and that requires predictability. And the bad news that complex systems are not predictable. So we have to live with that fact. We have to live in an age of uncertainty. And I know it's not easy, but instead of denying it, we should embrace it. That's my suggestion. I have one good news at the end. The system is non-predictable, which means that in the dynamical process of changing, the solution might emerge. Okay, I heard the word solution many times today. I think there is no solution. I think we should forget about solution. We should adapt. We should adapt to the changes, and solution will arise self-spontaneously. And that's the end. That's the positive message. It's not much, I think, but you have to live with it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for this very good dose of positive message at the end. I sense behind me some kind of big despair to arrange. Let me invite Professor Szabolcs Márka, who is an astrophysicist with a view on the world. So I believe you won't talk us about stars, but only star ideas.
Miniature stars. So can you please raise your hand, both of them, wave at me? 1, 2, 3. Can you please raise your hands, both of them, wave at me? Cool. So some of you did. Your response time was about 5 to 10 seconds. You asked back what to do. Can you please remember that when you consider that Titan II rocket's response time was 58 seconds before you were born? That rocket was aimed many places, probably my hometown, with unimaginable destruction, orders of magnitude more than Hiroshima. AI is coming. Your response time is unacceptable. Yeah? So be scared. I live in a city that is a place for the most obscene experiment. We are censored and monitored. So when we get destroyed by nuclear bomb, people will know what happened, how good was it, and who did it. But in spite of my pessimistic talk, I'm an optimist. I raise a family, I teach, and I enjoy New York City. So I will try to give some provocative statement today, and it's an honor to be here, honor to be among you, and I respect everybody on the panel highly. It's an honor to be part of the panel. So Kőszeg rocks. I got this message today morning from one of my friends. The weapon is misidentified, but this is on the market in my hometown. Okay, war is coming to us. I have the privilege to study universe at its extremes and also teach war at its extremes. I will tell you what does it teach me. I think Clausewitz is not right. War is not the purest form of diplomacy. War, and it always will be, essence of human, purest form of envy, a blatant murderous robbery. Every war is about taking something by one group from other group of people. Yeah, robbery happened in the history, and it is delusion to believe that robbery will not happen in the future. We are part of a robbery right now. You have to consider that a significant fraction of humans are psychopaths, perhaps 1 to 25%, for example in JS, depending on way of life, including science, military, politics. Psychopaths find their way to lead worldwide. So we can think as much as we want. It is a problem because being nice might not be the way of the future, because we might not be on the lead. So, anecdote I heard when a top general was presented with a technological solution to landmine detection, so people don't die after the war. He dismissed it as he had better, cheaper solution to landmines, the feet of the private. That's the value of human life, okay? Remember that, yeah? So, always remember that what is known, achievable, will be used at war. Professor Brooks provoked an idea from me. We have a lot of innovation. We had enough peace. We are ready for harvest, yeah? I don't know what he thinks, but that's a dark thought. So just think about the recent, in the last few years, breakdown of our societal standards. Yeah? Just think about the pollution in the First World War at Verdun. that region is still uninhabitable for humans in the heart of Europe, in the heart of France. So polluted, no humans can live there or around there. Cities in the heart of Europe has to import water because of the pollution in First World War. Primitive technology. Think about the pollution we are impacting on Chernozem, the best soil on Earth. Thank you. So think about the impact of the covert militarization of space. There are many things we don't know when generals are complaining about that we see the dark satellites they painted black for hundreds of millions of dollars. That's a disturbing thought. Yeah? Of course, space is not militarized. Of course, when we switch off Starlink, it has no military importance. I'm being sarcastic here. Yeah? Think about the chemical, biological, nuclear weapon R&D. Yeah? Make no mistakes, fusion research is nuclear weapon R&D. Make no mistakes. People are thinking about biological and chemical weapons. Yeah? This is not a joke. Imagine a biological weapon that targets a certain subspecies or a certain race of humans. I have to cry from that thought. Yeah? Because you don't need vaccine. It's not impossible. It's out there. Yeah? And you know, 5 years ago, people were exiled from humanity just thinking about killer drones, yeah, which kill, that's the end of my talk. One more minute, yeah, which kill people automatically. Right now, we are actually supporting companies who make killer drones, yeah. Norms are breaking down. We needed one war, and we forgot all the ethics we had, yeah. Proliferating long-range nuclear-capable systems, yeah, is great danger. Somebody shoots at a rocket at you, yeah. So can you just tell whether it's nuclear or traditional? Perhaps you don't wait until it arrives, yeah. These systems are commissioned, yeah, including oceans, land, air, and space, yeah. Automatic submarines are cruising the ocean with megaton warheads, flooding cities potentially. Yeah? It's really scary. Yeah? AI launch capabilities are necessary because human reaction times, as you proved, is very low. I bet you would hesitate more if somebody would ask you to kill 100 million people. That is what they kill when they launch nuclear weapons. Humans are not good for that. They will hesitate. Yeah? Some hesitated in the past. That's why we are here. So, extermination of scientists. It's happening. Scientists are murdered because they are scientists. And they are working on the wrong thing. What is wrong? The murder decides. So, enabling brilliant minds to serve evil. And this is my message today. Because our only renewable resource are brilliant, talented children. You know, you all here are the resource for the future. Brilliance are born everywhere, every day. And if we push brilliant children to serve evil, we will end up in living hell. We should not do that. We should enable brilliant people to do something good, to have a better future. That's what I ask you to do, have a better future. Because, yes, indeed, science can kill us all, right now. But science can make us live happier, healthier, and longer lives. Our choice, your choice. Yeah? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Szabolcs. Jody, I don't like to say that it's a ladies' or women's role to console. This is a traditional women's role in a family to console people if the picture or the family is not so good. But after this, I believe we have to discuss another component of the problem and maybe also of the solution, which was fortunately not too much mentioned by the gentleman before, the human or part of the socio-ecological, technological, political governance system we are supposed to live in and not to die. So, Jody, the floor is yours.
I need the my PowerPoint.
Yeah, you have it.
It's on now, or okay. Well, no, I'm not going to do that, János. Sorry, you boys are on your own. I have my own perspective, and I want to contemplate that for a bit. I think that the uncertainty and vulnerability that has been experienced for decades, if not centuries, outside of centers of colonialism and contemporary globalization, has now reached the global north. That's why everybody seems so hysterical in Europe and North America these days. We have geopolitical instability, we have geopolitical realignment, we have regional wars, we have climate and migration crises. You know, humanity, from a historical perspective, has taken remarkable steps forward, made advances, but we've also done horrific things. And today, I think we are in one of those backsliding periods, moments. And this is partly a product of disruption from technology and the ways we communicate with each other, and the way information is passed. I also, because this is my research focus, I think it has a lot to do with income inequality and social injustice. Because of technology and because of our interconnectedness, people can see more easily those that have and those that don't have. And people get angry, okay? You have the billionaire class who is taking over power now in the US and other places. And so this anger of the people who are not benefiting from globalization is manipulated, and then that anger is targeted at other marginalized groups. So we are in a moment of populism rise, and we'll need to be able to navigate that threat. Saying that you are pro-democracy these days is becoming a kind of cliche. And, but it doesn't have to mean that you're just there to try to support some old-fashioned structures that are creaking and cracking and breaking apart. It's also about defending what you stand for. I mean, I really think that the fight that we're in today is for the truth. We are seeing things with our own eyes that media and politicians are telling us are not true. And so we're living in a kind of upside-down world. And it's also a fight, I think, to help people to be less afraid. There is this incredible amount of fear that is now dominant, and it's keeping people from speaking out, from people speaking the truth. And we need leaders that are going to be able to inform people on these major issues, and also to present a brave and courageous front. Because these democracies die when people are too afraid to stand up for their rights. So that's just the introduction I wanted to give. This one. So I just wanted to give you, because I do a lot of research on global inequality and then the social reactions to these, I wanted to just give you an idea about a lot that is happening that you will never hear about in mainstream media. Now that we have these other alternatives of alternative media and social media sites, you can get more information about how people are organizing and rebelling against the system that we've come into. So these are interesting, the topics that are important to most people. So if we look at some of the risks coming out, I just made some generalities here. We have the United States versus itself, which we can see every single day, continued war and the partitioning of Ukraine, Israeli-Palestinian conflict, the ungoverned AI, and the disinformation. Disinformation was at the top of the list of what most people around the world find as the greatest threat. Rogue state actors. We have the fight for critical minerals. You saw this, debate with the Ukrainians now and the Americans about their mineral resources. And the problem is that we don't really have any room for error. Governments have limited scope to respond to shocks. And there's heightened risk of financial stress. And if you have heightened financial stress, then you have more social unrest and instability. And that is reflected in political instability. So this is what I call the Great Disruption. It's when inequalities rise. They can be economic inequalities, they can be social justice inequalities, they can be inequalities related to the benefits of globalization, and with this comes increasing social unrest. And the Great Disruption is when climate crises meets those social, economic, and political crises, that we have something that is called the Great Disruption. And I'm glad that I heard this word used quite frequently, almost in everyone's talks this morning, about disruption. Well, this is the Great Disruption, when we have a kind of tsunami of forces that are like a wave that coincides at one time, or over the next few decades. It's going to be happening at an accelerated rate, and these destructive kind of tendencies feed into one another to create a cycle of disruption that is going to be very difficult to deal with. So I'm very much in favor of Dan's approach that, and actually Dezső's approach, that adaptation is our best strategy, I think, for the future, but we have to think about it in a very complex way. Thank you.
Jody, for this summary and the risks. US versus itself is showing that, let's say, not only focusing on the US, that we have the problem within. So it is not only between countries, but within countries itself. And I am double citizen also of Germany, so I followed up to the night of the election yesterday in Germany. And if you calculate, not only looking to the extreme right, but also to the extreme left, you realize that 37% of the popular vote went to extremist parties on both ends of the spectrum. This is more than 1/3. And if you take the Greens, if I adopt the view of Professor Gelencher that the Greens are telling us things which are not true, this is 11% more. So it's almost the majority of the people vote for what, for, let's say, for a decent mind, is not providing the solution. This is also the crisis of a country from within, and if it is one of the leading power of the world, is the worst. Okay, our last speaker is Emil Brix from the Diplomatic Academy of Vienna. He will join us on online. I hope that technologically it is okay. Emil, the floor is yours, or the space is yours.
Thank you very much for your invitation. I apologize for not being in Kösek. This time I have to stay in Vienna. It is difficult for me to reflect on what I just heard because there was so much talk about disruption, and we diplomats and those who work in international politics really try always to work for stability. And it's obvious this is not the time of stability. And the global challenges, I know, we are looking for technological solutions. The speakers before me partly said there are no clear technological solutions, and the unpredictability is the real system. In diplomacy, we have a few principles, only a few principles. And one of the principles is certainly to create stability, because this is better not only for innovation, but for the life of, let's hope, everybody. But the system we have today, the international system, is obviously a time of instability. There is no clear-cut answer who will be the big powers and what a big power is. You already discussed the idea that big powers are no longer those who have territory or have a big number of people. One could challenge this, but certainly the definition of big power is changing. But as diplomats, I'm a realist in this, it is very obvious that, for instance, Russia is a big power only for two reasons, because it has the nuclear arsenal and it has resources in its land. So these are very traditional big power elements that you find there. So how should we respond to these fundamental challenges that we have? And when I look at the international scene, it's maybe worth saying, how are the states responding to this? How are the big players and the small players respond to these challenges? They are not so much concerned with what academics say. I can assure you, they are concerned how can we create something that helps us politically, and the strategies that they follow may be quite different. One of the strategies is ignore the changes, ignore them simply. And you have a lot of states who think ignoring, especially in the north, who still think actually, even if they say differently, they act in a way to ignore them. The second strategy is go alone. Only use your own national possibilities and work in the way of your national interest. America under the administration of Trump is the best example for this idea of go alone and only look out for the national interest, even if you have to speak to Russia and leave out the interests of a country like the Ukraine. And because it was mentioned with the Hungarian strategy of innovation, I would be careful not to rely too much in Europe on national strategies, not even in the field of innovation. We need a common European strategy for this, and this is one of the things where I think science diplomacy plays a role, and the European Union has commissioned a report on science diplomacy, which just came out 2 weeks ago. The first strategy is seek partners and alliances. This is what a lot of states do to cope with the changes, to mitigate the crises that we have here. To seek partners and alliances, but there is actually the danger that if you seek partner and alliances, you always have the enemy on the other side. So it's not so clear-cut positive that you seek partners and alliances. And the fourth strategy, as I see it at the moment, is try to reactivate what is international. And I think this is the strategy one should really promote, and diplomacy is trying to promote, to reactivate multinational interests instruments that we have from the UN system onwards to, it was already mentioned, the OSCE could be a bridge. It's a fairly dysfunctional bridge at the moment, I have to say, but I'm always in favor of trying to build regional bridges and to find possibly a way out of the fact that we still have a multinational system which is based on the power relations after the Second World War. And I fully agree what was mentioned, that we live in a time of transition from about 1988 to the present day. And we have to realize this, that the idea that innovation plays in a political field which is actually following ideological rules is something that we have to overcome. It's very difficult. You have this idea still in the Western mind that actually everything is a capitalist system, and then you have the injustice, and then how to overcome the social injustice. For instance, on the side of Russia and China, you have the idea that actually there are a lot of very valuable traditional systems like families, belief systems, and so on, which can help us out of this polycrisis. So these are still some ideological remnants of how the system should function. And in a time of geopolitical change, you have to see that even if we accept the diplomacy works in the national system, there is something which cannot be regulated by diplomacy. And this actually means that there is no global order that we can imagine at the time being. It's only the end of the old order. It has been already mentioned. Secondly, technology is decided more by non-state actors than by state actors. That's a real challenge for diplomacy, how to integrate non-state actors in the system if they have no interest to be integrated, and sometimes even state actors have no interest for them to be, for instance, regulated. Just look at the internet business, where the US has little interest to regulate it, whereas an organization like the European Union wants to regulate them. And thirdly, the topic of democracy versus autocracy is something that at the moment diplomats do not dare really to touch upon. And as we see, it's something where democracy is not on the strong foot at the moment. What is the European response? How should Europe respond, and how does it respond? It was mentioned that there was a principle of subsidiarity, which is a very important element also of international relations and diplomacy. But in some cases, like competitiveness, it doesn't help us at the moment too much. So when you read the reports by Mr. Letta and Mr. Draghi about the future of the European Union, what they are saying, Mr. Draghi told it in the European Parliament 2 weeks ago, he said, only if the European Union acts like one state, it acts like a state, then it has a chance to be competitive to other big powers. So there is a dilemma here, because on the one hand, we think that the European Union is a much more fair player. It talks about human rights. It talks about subsidiarity. It talks about a just system, global system. At the same time, it talks about competitiveness, which can only be realized if it acts as if it won't be one state. I still believe that we have a lot of chance to regulate new technology in a way that it is not hindering what we think that it has positive to do for society, but at the same time try to mitigate as much harm as possible. And you know that the European Union has a lot of those instruments already trying out, and we'll see where we are. My last pragmatic point is we should say science diplomacy can play a role in all of this. I heard today from the side of academics that what the role of science is. I would say if we really try to have a bridge between science and diplomacy, we have a chance that on the one hand we accept that science has a lot of clout in the geopolitical changes, but at the same time, it is one of those optimistic elements. Just think about international cooperation. Even the case of conflicts, even the case of war, some technological cooperation is still possible because politicians think it is possible. Just think about space cooperation, just think about climate cooperation with Russia, because as it turns out, without the data from Siberia, it is hard to create models which are realistic. So even in time of conflict, there is international cooperation in the field of science possible. And that's why I think a pragmatic instrument like creating a framework for science diplomacy, as it has been commissioned by the EU Council for the Commission, is a good thing. And it helps us with an EU-wide approach to look into the possibilities of science to work for international relations and for the international relations to rely on science cooperation. In an age of strategic rivalries, Europe needs to be more assertive in working in this field, and I have the feeling that the message is already there. I'm not so optimistic that we will manage to implement these sort of things that I discussed here, because the European Union is at the moment not in a state of affairs that it really knows which way it should be reformed. And again, there's two ways. Either it gets more centralized in major issues like competitiveness, or it returns to the principle of subsidiarity, which I hope doesn't mean that we have an age of national rivalry in Europe again, but even this is not out of the question. And the optimism that I share is that maybe scientists can help us to find a way in this dilemma of the European integration project. Thank you for your attention.